بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونستغفره اللهم إني أستغفرك من كل ذنب يكون في اشترائه قطع الرجاء ورد الدعاء وتوارد البلاء وترادف الهموم وتضاعف الغموم اللهم إني أستغفرك من كل ذنب يرد عنك دعائي ويقطع منك رجائي ويطيل في سخطك عنائي ويقصر بي عنك أملي فصل اللهم على محمد النبي الخاتم الأمين وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اتبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وصلي وسلم تسليما كثيرا. I started out with a dua, a supplication to Allah from every fault and failure that creates a distance and a sense of alienation between us as human beings and as Muslims from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A dua that reminds us ourselves that although Allah has set the rules as clear as the laws of gravity and the laws of causation that govern nature. Allah said, I am with you as long as you are with me. And if I am with you, you are with yourselves. Meaning that if you gain me, if you gain Allah, you gain yourselves. Not only do I partner with you in terms of giving you meaning and a sense of repose and tranquility and assuredness, not only does acknowledging that you have a maker and that this maker is the owner of the universe, not only does this define wisdom, because then you understand that you have responsibilities in existence that exceed simple self-interest, self-indulgence, and all the base desires that human beings are capable of. If you remember God as your partner, if you remember Allah as your partner, then you are able to think of higher values, and you are able to contemplate ultimate questions about wisdom and fairness and beauty and justice. But Allah also told us in very concrete terms, I am with you. In fact, Allah describes God's self as closer to us than our jugular veins. And Allah tells us that Allah, God, yujibu da'wat al-da'i iza da'ah, that God answers the call of that who calls upon him, whoever calls upon him, upon God. So in fact, it's as if God has said, I am here for you. But there are certain rules. They're like the rules of nature. They're like the rules of gravity. They're like the rules of causation. You can study them in history. You can absorb them. You can learn them. And among these rules are the rules that give us, that create an alliance between us and the divine. Put it differently, what the divine, what Allah, what God blesses and what God does not bless. What God in fact partakes in and what God will not partake in. Now, some of this is so obvious by rational means that one feels absurd just stating them. It is obvious that God will not partake in ugliness. So if you human beings are going to commit something ugly, for instance, al-ifsad fil ard, corrupting the earth, don't count God as part of this endeavor. If you do it, even if you do it in God's name, it is not part of God, and God does not bless it, and God does not answer it. If you human beings commit injustice, don't count God in. Don't commit foul injustices and acts of ugliness and suffering and hardship, and then wonder why God is not with you and why God has not aided you. But even more, السائرين في طريق الله, those who journey in the path of God, know that there are certain actions, certain codes of conduct that sever the ties between you and the divine, so that you may pray and not be answered. And in fact, you might even call out and not be heard. These are the most terrifying scenarios, because the sense of loneliness and the sense of lack of purpose and the sense of letdown and the sense of uprootedness and alienation and meaninglessness that a human being feels when they are accompanied by nothing but their own self-demons is horrific indeed. And if you reflect upon your own conduct with a serious sense of moral inventory, you can always recognize what in your own behavior, your own attitudes, your own conduct that might have caused you to abandon yourself in the path of loneliness. In other words, what in your own conduct, in your own behavior, have alienated the light, the magnanimous, the beautiful, so that it no longer responds to you. Use logic and common sense, because Islam, in its theology, is the religion of logic and common sense. Put law aside. Law is a technical field for those who are technically trained to deal with law. But when it comes to the core and heart and spirit of Islam, logic tells you if you play in the mud and you don't clean yourself, don't blame yourself if there are consequences to playing in the dirt. If you stay in the dirt and you don't attempt to cleansing, it's one thing if you attempt to become clean and you ask Allah for help, but you persist in cleaning. But it's quite another, as human beings often do, is that they take the paths of the impure, the ugly, the dirty, and then what they wonder why Allah is not next to me. The divine already told us repeatedly, Allah la yuhibbu al-fasad, Allah la yuhibbu al-zalimin. Allah doesn't approve of corruption and doesn't love injustice, doesn't love the miserly, doesn't love those who do not take care of the poor and needy. There are the Quran, as the hadith that occurred in many versions, depending on which version, but all the versions agree on the first part of the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ tells his companions there will come an age towards the final days, age of fitan, that there will be an age where of great trials and tribulations and confusion. And the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, well, what should people do then? And the answer is very simple. Alaykum bil-Qur'an al-Kareem. Hold on to the Quran. Because the Quran, again, the technical parts of the Quran, the legal verses, the verses that talk about inheritance laws or divorce laws, that's for lawyers, that's for jurists. But the heart and core, the pulse of the Quran, reminds you of the laws that control the relationship between the created and creator. Laws as simple and as straightforward as the laws of causation, the laws of physics, the laws of gravity. Don't walk a path that is the antithesis of divinity and then wonder why divinity is not there. Now, I say this because look at the innate understanding of our faith by those who were taught and raised by the Prophet ﷺ. Imam Ali, for instance, Prophet's cousin, and of course, I'm sure all of you know who Imam Ali is, radiyallahu anhu. When he is asked about the basis of creation, the logic upon which creation is the anchor of creation. And Imam Ali responds, again, remember that Imam Ali, who was the youngest convert to Islam and thoroughly formed and shaped at the hands of the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslim message. العدل أساس به قوام العالم. Elsewhere he says, جعل الله العدل قواما للأنام. He says the base of what the ideal of creation is about is justice. Justice is the anchor for the rest of the universe. So much so that divinity will always be in the side of justice. The demonic, the satanic, will always be in the side of injustice. After justice, after that base, that foundation, prayer, fasting, Hajj can come and bring the equation closer to the divine. But if justice is lacking, no amount of prayer will make that ugliness beautiful. العدل قوام الأنام. Now, Muslim philosophers went beyond that and said, if we really think at what defines beauty, physical beauty, we find that the key to physical beauty is proportionality and balance, i.e. a form of justice. Measurements, the way a flower grows, the way what we even as human beings recognize as a beautiful face, it is proportions that follow equations that mathematicians can even discover. Excess in all its forms starts deviating away from the balance and from justice. That simple idea inspired our entire civilization. But here, I'm not talking about the Islamic civilization because I don't want to take us through that route. I want to remain at these first principles that form the first Muslims, that shape our identity and our trajectory as Muslims in this world. No, and this is something I remind you and I remind myself and I remind my children and your children and will continue to do so till the very final day of my life. Islam is the only religion on the face of this earth that makes philosophical sense. Judaism has become tribal and interlinked with an ethnic identity. Christianity is incoherent because of its concept of Trinity, with all the mysteries of the Trinity, which no one will ever solve, no one has solved, and no one will solve. The only religion that has balance, a clear idea of monotheism, and a clear idea of the Maker, and a clear idea of the laws of causation and beginning, and a clear idea, even the beginning of thinking about things like eternity, is Islam. Hinduism and Buddhism, as many beautiful things as they contain, the idea of reincarnation is full of so many holes that it falls apart. So rest assured, and I mean this, that if you philosophically, if you pursue the path of philosophical theology, you will find there's only one religion on the face of this earth that holds up to scrutiny. From the principles of justice, if you're thinking from within the paradigms of justice between earth and heaven and within earth, and that is Islam. If Muslims realize this, their energy, their taqah, their power would explode in this earth, and they would carry their faith with so much pride as a gift to humanity. But we have lost the path. When we lost the path of justice, when we forgot that the very first premise, the reason reincarnation is a problem, for instance, is that it is inconsistent with the principles of justice. The reason that Trinity is a problem and original sin is a problem is that it is inconsistent with the principles of justice. The reason that a tribal religion and an ethnic God is a problem is because it's inconsistent with the principles of justice. The reason Islam withstands scrutiny is because it is the only religion that is consistent with the theoretical principles of justice. I know that for most Muslims these days, they might not even know what I'm talking about. But this is the problem. And the day when Muslims understand exactly what this means is the day we start changing the world. We start changing the world like we once did, because we know we carry the truth in our heart. The truth of Adam, the truth of Ibrahim, the truth of Moses, Musa, the truth of Jesus, Isa, the truth of Joseph, Yusuf, the truth of Dawood, David, the truth of all the prophets. Because that is what they brought to humanity from the divine. Allah told us, or taught us, look, before I get to that, look at so many of what the companions of the Prophet ﷺ and Ahlul Bayt have left us. When they tell us in a hadith transmitted in Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, forgot at the beginning, بايعنا رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام على السمع والطاعة في المكره والمنشط وعلى الإثر علينا. And then وأن نقيم ألسنتنا بالعدل أينما كنا لا نخاف في الله لومة لائم. And in another version أن نقول بالحق لا نخاف في الله لومة لائم. في الله لومة لائم. When we first gave our allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ, this is in Medina. So we gave our allegiance, now they're joining the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, so they give the allegiance to follow the Prophet and to obey the Prophet. That's normal. And by the way, the Prophet ﷺ died, so a ruler can't come in and say, well, I take the place of the Prophet, give me your allegiance for obedience. No. The type of obedience that I would give the Prophet ﷺ, I wouldn't give to anyone else. Khalas, it's done. Obeying the Prophet is different than obeying any ruler. But we gave our allegiance to obey the Prophet. and not to put the I, ourselves, first. Not to be selfish, not to be self-centered. And that we speak in one version that has been reported widely, that we speak for justice and don't let the fear of consequences affect our testimony in favor of justice. In another version, it says, and we speak and defend al-haq, truth, and not fear, and not allow the fear of consequences to mute us or to stop us from speaking in favor of truth. Now, again, go back to these early Muslims. The early Muslims. You are joining the Prophet ﷺ. There is the Prophet. There is Umar. There is Abu Bakr. There is Uthman. There is Ali. There is all these wonderful Sahaba. And even though they are right there, you still feel an obligation to speak and defend truth and defend justice. Again, think like the mentality of today. Today, people who don't come to even 0.01% of what the Prophet ﷺ was, or any in the companions, and if they are rulers, they come and say, okay, I am here, we don't need your advice. The Prophet was there, and yet the Prophet would take their allegiance, their oath, to stand by justice. He wouldn't take their oath to obey me and shut your mouth up, and don't say things that I don't like, or things that would give me a headache because I am a prophet and God tells me what to do. I don't need your input. I don't need your feedback. If the Prophet, at the time of the Prophet and the companions are right there, and the oath of allegiance is, yes, thank you, but I need your testimony for justice and for truth. Reflect upon this. MBS says, أنا ربكم الأعلى. MBZ says, أنا ربكم الأعلى. I am your God. I don't need your input. God has chosen me. God has made me king. CC says, if you say anything, I throw you in prison and destroy your family. Even Trump says the same garbage. I don't need you. Here is the Prophet Muhammad and the companions. And what oath does he take from people? He takes from people the oath that you will not remain silent if there is an injustice, and that you will speak up for truth, and in his lifetime, with all the companions there. So if any idiot comes and tells you, well, you know, brother, sister, there are issues, considerations, tell them, shut up! If it was good enough for the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, surely it's good enough for you, you moron! You have destroyed our religion! But things don't just stop there. Because as I said, and I don't remember if I mentioned this hadith before, but as I always say, there is so much of our tradition the hadith that is reported in Musnad Abu Dawood in عملة الخطيئة في الأرض. If injustices and sin are committed on this earth, the Prophet ﷺ, again, teaching his companions, the same companions that took an oath to speak and test for truth and justice in his lifetime, the Prophet ﷺ says, إن عملت الخطيئة في الأرض, if sin and injustice is committed on this earth, there are two basic groups of people. من لم ينكرها, that who at a minimum does not condemn it, does not even recognize it as a sin or an injustice, so fails to condemn it. That person, كأنه شهدها, it is as if they were present and approved of it. ومن أنكرها كأنه لم يشهدها ولم يرضى بها. Whoever condemns it in their heart, it is as if they were not present and they are not responsible for it. So, if you witness the massacres in Syria, and at a minimum, if your heart doesn't condemn it, if you witness the massacres and the deaths of children in Yemen, at a minimum, if your heart does not condemn it, if you witness the massacres in Egypt and the torture and suffering in people, at a minimum, your heart does not condemn it. If your heart is neutral or apathetic, or if your heart is actually pro the zalim, pro the unjust, you are with the unjust, against the sufferer, the victim, then you bear the sin of the unjust. Now, you might ask why? Why is that? Because of the philosophy of justice. When do human beings fail to contemplate the true measurements and proportions of justice? When they no longer recognize the just and differentiate it from the unjust. In other words, when the moral failure is such that it's not just that you no longer can differentiate between types of light, because there are, light is light, and light could come from the sun. But in a different day and age, light could come from a light bulb. It's still light. But the day and age had made the nature of that light different. The big disaster is when you become blind, as the Quran describes it, and you no longer recognize the light as light. But before any human becomes blind, they grow up in a tribe of people of light deniers. Put it differently, injustice becomes prevalent when people no longer recognize it as an injustice. So, for instance, the first flogging that took place in Islam for political reasons caused an uproar in the Muslim community. It nearly resulted in a revolution. 1400 years later, from one flogging that nearly caused a revolution to thousands upon thousands, if not millions, of floggings and tortures and degradation that take place all over the Muslim world, and Muslims no longer react. When Sa'id bin Musayyab, the famous jurist, was tortured by an unjust ruler centuries ago, the entire Muslim world was in shock. How could it be that you jail a scholar? How could it be that you torture a scholar? Maybe the world is going to end tomorrow. Today, scholars are jailed and tortured everywhere, and we're accustomed to it. Before we became accustomed to it, numbness set in. And numbness set in when we, at a minimum, fail to condemn injustice in our hearts before or else. So we no longer recognize what is wrong as wrong. And then when Imam Ali radiallahu anhu tells us, Al-Adl Qawam al-Dunya, that the entire basis of life on earth is justice, it doesn't mean anything to us because we no longer recognize justice. We no longer feel anything about justice. We don't even know what justice is. It has become an abstract concept that is so remote. Like, to be honest, and we have to become honest, not these dogmatic, apologetic khutbahs. It's like when someone says, Rahmatullah, God's mercy. It no longer makes our hearts bleed and our tears flow. Because for so many of us, we've lost touch with God's mercy. We don't even know it anymore. Because there's so much cruelty in existence that we as human beings allowed. That they, well, you know, does this mean it's wrong to torment poor children at the border and break up families and have children go to sleep crying every single day and be damaged for their rest of their lives? You know, is anything required of us? Seriously? You don't know if anything is required of you? It is as simple, see the light. See ugliness for ugliness, and righteousness and beauty for what it is. The world has lost a great deal when it lost Muslims. Muslims, it's because we're brainwashed by colonialism and Orientalism. Muslims don't recognize how much beauty they brought to this world. You take the average Muslim and they're walking, you know, they're broken, they don't know, they don't have no self-confidence, they're not sure of themselves. You know, Allah, just please let me keep my face and not have a fitna and lose my face. Instead of walking with their head high because they belong to a religion that has brought enlightenment to this world. And this is a challenge that confronts all of us, especially Muslims in the West, is to rediscover our liberation and our gift to the world and our moral certitude and our moral anchor, and that we are the religion, Islam is the religion of justice and beauty and mercy, regardless of how many insane, crazy people do insane, crazy things in its name because they have become blind and unable to differentiate between darkness and light. نسأل الله يستجيب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمين الخاتم النبي الخاتم الأمين وعلى آله وأصحابه واتبعه من الصالحين. Recently, a new wave of Islamophobic articles have been published attacking me. Some of you might have already seen them. I frankly haven't read them, although some people who've read them told me about them. And I wear it as a badge of pride. But my point, the reason I mention this, is that it is important for all those who hear me to know that all of us who see Islam as a light unto humanity, all of us who see Islam as a path to justice and enlightenment and human values, all of us who take Allah seriously when Allah says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, we have dignified human beings, and we say, what Allah has dignified, مَا كَرَّمَ اللَّهُ فَلَا يُهَانَ, what Allah has dignified cannot be humiliated. Who are you? If Allah created a human being and made that human being stand up tall, who are you to force this human being to submit to you, or to suffer, or to be tortured, or to be imprisoned? Who are you? Any human being, Muslim or not Muslim. The humiliation of a human being is blasphemy. All of us who understand this are coming under unbelievable pressure. We are being targeted in the most vicious way. It would be all worth it if you want to know. So many young people say, but things are cloudy for us. If you want to know who is on the righteous path and who has deviated from the path, look at what the enemies of Islam seek to destroy. That is the best way to recognize things. See who the Islamophobes target, and that should be a pretty darn good indication as to who is on the righteous path and who isn't. Whoever the Islamophobes praise or sanction or even just overlook, they don't mention, they not even praise or attack, then that is pretty darn good evidence that that's someone who is among the blind, or at least is not clear-sighted. This is the blessing in the curse of Islamophobia. That while Islamophobia has demonized our faith, and did so because of our apathy and our miserliness and our failure to spend money to protect our religion, the blessing that came with Islamophobia is that it very clearly allowed you to know who is on the right path and who is not on the right path. Today, it's like when the companions radiallahu anhum gave their allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. They told the Prophet, we obey you, but even with the Prophet and the other companions there, we will not shut up. We will not hold our tongues when it comes to justice and when it comes to truth. Then you think, who in this world speaks for justice, for beauty, for the principles, not for the law, not for salah, not for wudu, not for... It's easy to speak for these things. You can be the most cowardly human being in the world and give a khutbah every week about hijab. No cost. No one is going to persecute you. That's not the oath. that the companions gave the Prophet ﷺ. They didn't say, we give you an oath to sit there and follow the letter of every. That's something that they learned from practice, from the Prophet ﷺ. And there was, if there was an issue that arose, they knew who the specialists were and who they go to consult with, etc., etc. But the morality, the moral order, I say this because we truly live in a period where so many Muslims, including those who call themselves the servants of the two holy sites, the government of MBS and the government of MBZ, have gone so far in aligning themselves with Trumpian policies and Israeli policies. It's as if the Quran, it's exactly like the Quran describes them. يَبْتَغُونَ الْعِزَّةَ عِنْدَهُمْ بَلْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الْعِزَّةِ. That it's as if they want to find pride and honor in the approval of the Trump administration and the approval of the right-wing Israeli government that persecutes Palestinians and Arabs and steals Muslim lands every single day. And that's the government they want approval from. You all heard about the visit of the Israeli foreign minister to the Emirat and the very close relations between the governments of Saudi and the Emirat and Israel. And I wouldn't mind these relations if it honored the Aqsa Mosque and gave us back the Aqsa Mosque and gave Palestinians their rights. But when we don't even have that, but there are also a lot of American Muslim so-called scholars and imams who then befriend the governments that befriend Trump and the Israelis. I warn you against any authority in Europe, in the US, in Canada, that is close to the Saudi government or the Emirati government, close to the two devils of Islam today. Any imam that has an incestuous relationship with the unjust is unjust. I don't care what else he says or she says. Learn the rule. If the unjust love you, then you are unjust. If the unjust hate you, then you are just. It's as simple as that. Allah has given us so many indications and so many adillas and so many evidence, and Allah has given us every opportunity. Allah has even allowed Islamophobia to be what it is, so that it becomes very clear who speaks for the right path and who doesn't. If you see someone that is either celebrated by Islamophobes or not targeted by Islamophobes, then that's a sure bet that this is someone that you should avoid. How much more clear could it be? And remember that there is a final day, and there is a hereafter, and you will stand before Allah. And all the things that I said that you could have thought about yourself, by yourself, you don't even need me to say. Everything I said, you could have just sat and reasoned through. That's the value of reason. That's the power of reason. You could just sit and think step by step. And you will be held to account for every act of obfuscation and self-deception you've engaged in for your own convenience, or because you want social approval, or because you want people to like you, or because you want people to invite you, or because you want whatever it is that you want. And those who paid the price for truth on this earth will be the source of envy in the hereafter. That is what Iman gives you. That's what Iman gives you. It stays you on the path because you look beyond the instant moment that you exist in. Otherwise, we would have given up a long time ago. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وأسأل الله يستجب لكم. اللهم إني داع فأمن. اللهم اعف عنا وارحمنا يا رب واغفر لنا واهدنا لأقرب من هذا رشدا يا علي يا عظيم وانصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم يا علي يا عظيم. God, we praise you and supplicate in your name. Please forgive our sins and grant us wisdom and grant us knowledge of your path and grant us sight and insight and grant us the ability to see the light as light and follow it towards you and come and bring us closer to you, Ya Allah. Welcome as-salam.